Republican Congressman Michael Burgess of Texas. Congressman, thanks so much for joining us here on the program. We heard the apologies. He did address Congress, but do you feel like Mark Zuckerberg yesterday came out of this unscathed?
Well, you know, you have to go actually a little bit further back, and the company itself is under a consent decree with the Federal Trade Commission, and the Federal Trade Commission is one of the federal agencies that's under our jurisdiction in the Energy and Commerce Committee. So I suspect he is going to have to answer some questions about the compliance with the consent decree that they voluntarily entered into in 2011. It does seem that they violated the spirit of that consent decree, but we'll get to hear his justification and his response to that. I think for me the bigger thing is that people perhaps are now more acutely aware of, I'm as bad as anyone else. I find out about a new app. I want the app as fast as possible. Let it deliver for me. So I zip through the stuff, get me what I want to get. But people do need to be aware of these consent arrangements that they're going through. And then I think Facebook has an obligation to explain to us how they are perhaps going to increase the transparency of those consent agreements that people are going into, the user agreements that people are entering into when they download an app, and what is the function of that app when they're not actually on the site? Is it still running in the background? And then finally, is there a way that you can put a time limit on your data that is collected and stored by a site like Facebook? Right now, I don't know that anyone has the answer to that question. It will be interesting to see if Mrs. Zuckerberg has any thoughts on that.
And it's not just so much words, is it? As you say, it's the actions, and you are one of the people who will be on this committee today. What are the things that you will be really pressing him on?
Well, as I just outlined, number one, the compliance with the consent decree that they voluntarily entered into several years ago. And is there a way to perhaps build in some volatility to the information so that it is not there in perpetuity? Staff and I were looking at petroglyphs on the internet this morning. Here's an intense human emotion to document and share events that are important in their lives, and now many tens of thousands of years later, they're still emblazoned on cave walls. It does bring to mind, what is the durability of this information? Who controls it over the long term? And does the consumer actually have any rights here as to the length of time that their information will be available to app developers on the sites?
And I suppose just briefly, I mean, it's not just about the data, is it? I mean, it's one of the other challenges is the concerns about the arms race with Russia. So we've got things like, fake accounts, for example, troll farms, fake news that comes out of it. Is this something that you will be raising?
It's either in the direct questioning or questions for a written response. There was an issue in Virginia where a candidate for governor was tagged to a story, but then on Facebook, the person who actually posted it was able to dramatically change the headline of the story. They didn't change, I think it was a Washington Post story, they didn't change the content of the story, but the headline, there was apparently a way to modify the headline on Facebook, which cast the candidate in a very unfavorable light. And boy, that stuff's hard to unsee. It's a bell it's hard to unring after it happens.
Indeed. We'll have to leave it there. Congressman Michael Burgess will be watching closely in the next couple of hours. Thanks very much for joining us.